time, some astrologers came forward and denounced the Jews. They said to King Nebuchadnezzar,
O king, live forever. You have issued a decree, O king, that everyone who hears the sound of the horn, flute, zither, lyre, harp, pipes, and all kinds of music must fall down and worship the image of gold, and that whoever does not fall down and worship will be thrown into a blazing furnace. But there are some Jews whom you have set over the affairs of the province of Babylon, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, who pay no attention to you, O king. They neither serve your gods nor worship the image of gold you have set up.
Furious with rage, Nebuchadnezzar summoned Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. So these men were brought before the king, and Nebuchadnezzar said to them,
Is it true, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, that you do not serve my gods or worship the image of gold I have set up? Now, when you hear the sound of the horn, flute, zither, lyre, harp, pipes, and all kinds of music, if you are ready to fall down and worship the image I made, very good. But if you do not worship it, you will be thrown immediately into a blazing furnace. Then what God will be able to rescue you from my hand?
Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego replied to the king,
O Nebuchadnezzar, we do not need to defend ourselves before you in this matter. If we are thrown into the blazing furnace, the God we serve is able to save us from it, and he will rescue us from your hand, O king. But even if he does not, we want you to know, O king, that we will not serve your gods or worship the image of gold you have set up.
If you have your Bible, turn to Daniel chapter 3, starting at verse 1. And we're going to talk about the formidable courage of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego today. And while you're turning there, I want to tell you about a best-selling book series called The Worst Case Scenario Survival Handbook. These are manuals based on interviews with experts in a variety of different fields. They have sections on things like how to escape from quicksand, how to jump from a building into a dumpster, how to perform an emergency tracheotomy, in case you ever have to do that. All you need is a sharp razor or a sharp knife and a ballpoint pen without the ink, and you could do that. These books have sold millions of copies. Some of the advice is pretty predictable. One section is how to deal with a charging bull, and the number one rule is don't antagonize the bull. It seems fairly obvious. But sometimes the advice is quite demanding. There's a section called How to Survive If Your Parachute Fails to Open. This is what it says. First, signal to a jumping companion. They don't say what to do if you don't have a jumping companion. Signal to a jumping companion whose chute is not yet open that you're having trouble. When your companion and new best friend gets to you, hook arms. You'll be falling at a terminal velocity of about 130 miles per hour. Open the chute. The chute opening shock will be severe, probably enough to dislocate or break both of your arms. You may hit the ground slowly enough to only break one leg, but your chances of survival are quite high. So that's how to survive if your parachute fails to open. And now that we have a little bit of a sense of what this book is about, I want to try a little test on our survival skills to see how savvy we are in Pleasanton, California. So take a look at the screens for a moment. What do you do if confronted by an angry mountain lion? This is in the book. They give 4 options, so you pick which one is best. A, run. B, play dead. C, make yourself look bigger by opening your coat. Or D, sing a gentle, happy song. Tell the person next to you what you think the answer is. How many of you said sing a gentle, happy song? You were wrong. I'm sorry. Believe it or not, the correct answer, according to Worst Case Scenario Survival Handbook, is C. Make yourself look bigger by opening your coat. Now, same situation. You're facing an angry mountain lion. What do you do if confronted by an angry mountain lion when a small child is present? This is also in the manual. A, pick the child up. B, shield the child with your body. C, shield your body with the child. Or D, run. You may not be able to outrun the mountain lion, but you'll definitely be able to outrun the small child. Do you want to know what the answer is? Some of you are like, yes, please tell me this may happen to me, right? They say to pick up the child because it'll make you look bigger. So do anything you can, like open your coat, open the child's coat, anything you can to make yourself look bigger. So if you leave today with nothing else, you can say, I learned today how to survive if I'm attacked by a mountain lion. This is what the author of these books say. The principle behind these books is a simple one. You just never know. You never really know what curves life will throw at you, what's lurking around the corner. You never really know when you might be called upon to choose life or death with your actions. But when you are called, you need to know what to do. That's what these books are about. That's why they're written. Well, today we're going to study another kind of worst case scenario and see how real life people, ordinary people just like you and me, responded. Because you never know what curves life will throw at you and when you'll be called to choose life or death. But when you're called, and you will be called, and I will be called, we need to know what to do. And that's actually why the Bible was written. Look at Daniel 3, starting at verse 1. King Nebuchadnezzar made an image of gold, 60 cubits high and 6 cubits wide, and set it up on the plain of Dura in the province of Babylon. He then summoned the satraps, prefects, governors, advisors, treasurers, judges, magistrates, and all the other provincial officials to come to the dedication of the image he had set up. So the satraps, prefects, governors, advisors, treasurers, judges, magistrates, and all the other provincial officials assembled for the dedication of the image that Nebuchadnezzar had set up, and they stood before it. Then the herald loudly proclaimed, "Nations and peoples of every language, this is what you are commanded to do. As soon as you hear the sound of the horn, flute, zither, lyre, harp, pipe, and all kinds of music, you must fall down and worship the image of gold that King Nebuchadnezzar has set up. Whoever does not fall down and worship it will immediately be thrown into a blazing furnace." Therefore, as soon as they heard the sound of the horn, flute, zither, lyre, harp, and all kinds of music, all the nations and people of every tongue, every language, fell down and worshiped the image of gold that King Nebuchadnezzar had set up. Let's just stop here for a moment. Now, if you were here last week, you know at the end of Daniel 2, Nebuchadnezzar seemed like he was on the verge of becoming a servant of the God of heaven, of the God of Daniel, the God of Israel. Remember, Daniel was the only one who could tell Nebuchadnezzar what he had dreamt and what the meaning of that dream was. And it included the assurance of a coming judgment of God, the rock that would cover the whole earth and destroy the statue. And at the end of it, Nebuchadnezzar said, "Surely, Daniel, your God is the God of gods and the Lord of kings." But now it turns out that Nebuchadnezzar has a very selective memory of Daniel's message. He conveniently forgets about Daniel's message about God, about the living stone, the coming of the kingdom of God and God's shattering judgment. But apparently he does remember that he was the head of gold in the statue. And apparently he thinks about how the kingdom is vulnerable because we're told in the dream that it stands on iron and clay. These two diverse elements that don't mix, and they make his kingdom vulnerable. Now Nebuchadnezzar is trying to create a society of captured peoples from different nations and languages and cultures and so on. And he's dealing with what we talk about in our day as multiculturalism. We sometimes act as if we're the first ones to ever face the situation. We're not. Nebuchadnezzar faced it a long time ago. And he decides that what all these diverse peoples need in Babylon is unity, something to hold them together, so that his kingdom is not vulnerable and split apart by all these factions. And how better to create unity than to bring in a common religion? So he makes a statue. Now, what God this statue represents is left quite vague, and I think it's left deliberately vague because this is not so much about religion as it is about politics and power. We have a motto on the Great Seal of the United States, E pluribus unum, which means from the many, one. And Nebuchadnezzar is concerned that there are too many gods, that there's not a oneness. And so he tries to create oneness. And he invests a lot of effort into motivating people to go along. He creates a remarkable, this artistic, beautiful statue. We're told it's 90 feet high and made of gold. It's an object of immense value. And then he has this music performed by every instrument that he can think of. And that's why this long list of instruments gets repeated over and over. It would be very impressive. And the people are to make a pilgrimage to the plain of Dura outside of the city of Babylon. And they will see the most impressive gathering of leaders from all the peoples and cultures that they have ever seen assembled. Again, that's why the writer uses these long lists and they get repeated. He's talking about how very impressive this is. And if all that's not enough to compel people to bow down, then Nebuchadnezzar decreed that failure to comply meant you would be thrown into a fiery furnace and to be burned alive. Now picture this moment. There's this vast assembly of countless peoples from all kinds of tribes and tongues, and they've never seen anything like this in the history of the world. It would be a lot like we see today, the opening ceremonies of the Olympics, except add to it that it's to be this transcendent religious experience. The music starts, and the people are highly motivated to bow down. Literally, verse 7 in the text, it says, as soon as they were hearing, they were falling. It was like a race to see who hits the ground first. There's this like ripple of noise where everyone is falling to the ground. But then 3 of the highest ranking officials are still standing in the front of the assembly. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego are the only 3 standing while everyone else has fallen to the ground. In the midst of a submitted nation in an act that looks like either formidable courage or suicide, they refuse to bend the knee. They refuse to bow their heads. And no one has any doubt about what will happen next. Look at verse 8. At this time, some astrologers came forward and denounced the Jews. And the word denounce here literally means to eat the pieces of them. It could be translated slandering. It's intended by the writers to convey like intense hostility. These astrologers, these bureaucrats, they've been placed under Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, and now they're consumed with jealousy, and this is their opportunity to bring these guys down. And if you've been with us for this series, by this point you know Nebuchadnezzar well enough to know, to be able to predict what his response is going to be. Look at verse 13. Furious with rage, Nebuchadnezzar summoned Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. So these men were brought before the king, and Nebuchadnezzar said to them, is it true, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, that you do not serve my gods or worship the image of God I have set up? Now when you hear the sound of the horn, flute, zither, lyre, harp, pipe, and all the kinds of music, if you are ready to fall down and worship the image I've made, very good. But if you do not worship it, you will be thrown immediately into a blazing furnace. Then what God will be able to rescue you from my hand? And I just want to pause there for a moment and just consider this question that he asks. Nebuchadnezzar asks, what God will be able to deliver you from my hand? But this question would be in the category of a rhetorical question. When a speaker asks a rhetorical question, he or she is not looking for information. They're looking to make a point. Parents' favorite questions are rhetorical questions. The number one favorite question of a parent is, do you want a spanking? It's a rhetorical question. They're not really looking for information when they ask that question. No child says, well, I was going to play Xbox, but yeah, spanking, sure. You know, it's a rhetorical question. So when Nebuchadnezzar asks, what God can deliver you from my hand, he's not looking for information. He's not looking for a name. He's just saying, you better understand, you're in my hands. There's no way out. You either obey me or else. But much to his surprise, these three men don't treat it as a rhetorical question at all. Look at verse 16. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego replied to him, King Nebuchadnezzar, we do not need to defend ourselves before you in this matter. If we are thrown into the blazing furnace, the God we serve is able to deliver us from it. And he will deliver us from your majesty's hands. Now, I just want to pause here for a moment because this is a statement of remarkable faith. Our God is able to save us from the furnace. He is able to rescue us from danger. He is able to rescue us from you, your majesty. God is able. And I don't know if it's possible for followers of God to spend too much time reflecting on stories that teach this truth. The God you and I serve, the God who meets us here in this room, our God is able. I want to tell you one such story. This is a book from Ken Davis. He writes, a pastor friend of mine, Joel Morgan, planned on visiting missionaries in Eastern Europe. He asked friends who traveled in this area what he should pack. There were many helpful suggestions, but everyone agreed you might want to bring extra food. While staying in rural villages with no electricity or running water, they might be forced to go without meals. It would be wise to have easily packed snacks on hand for survival rations. One missionary warned Joel to bring more than he needed. Some of his supplies might be confiscated by customs. Joel asked himself questions as he wandered through a grocery store. What shall I take that won't catch the eye of a customs agent? What won't spoil? What will serve as an energy boost? And he whispered this prayer. Lord, you know the things that I need and the things that will make it through customs. I'm just going to walk down these aisles and trust you to prompt me to select the right items. Instantly, his eyes fell on a display of Reese's peanut butter cups. He put a big king-sized pack of them in his cart. Farther on down the aisle, he was drawn to an arrangement of tapioca pudding snacks. From my perspective, when anyone is drawn to tapioca pudding, it's already a miraculous sign. Finally, he scooped up some small cans of fruit cocktail, some gum, and some hard candy. Surely, he thought, these items will tide me over if I get hungry. On the fourth day of the trip, Joel arrived in Romania. He would spend several days with a couple who had labored for 14 months there. The family had been sent to Romania by a national missions organization, but for all practical purposes, they'd been forgotten. They faced harsh conditions. Heat and electricity were often turned off for days. Joel and his team were the first English-speaking people the missionaries had seen for 6 months. The simple opportunity to talk with someone was cause for celebration, and their 2 teenage daughters were starved for anything American. Joel spent some time chatting with them and praying with their family, and then when he was about to leave, he suddenly thought about the survival goodies that he'd purchased for himself from a week before. He had an idea. It was October, but why not allow those snacks to celebrate an early Christmas? So he retrieved his backpack with all the goodies securely hidden inside, and then he sat down with the family in their living room, and he took on the role of Santa Claus and played it to the hilt. He asked the 2 teenage girls if they would have one thing from the U.S., what would it be? In unison, they sang out, candy. What kind, Joel asked, confident they'd love anything that he offered. The mother chimed in, the girls love Reese's peanut butter cups, but they're not available in this part of the world. With a lump in his throat, Joel reached into his backpack and pulled out the king-size pack he'd smuggled into the country. The girls jumped up and down joyfully, laughing as they held their new treasure between them. Wiping a tear from his eye, Joel asked their mother, what item from home would you like, or what would brighten your day? It was a risk. What if she wanted, say, a side of beef? But with one miracle already in the bag, what could go wrong? I miss fruit, the mother replied a bit sheepishly, especially citrus. Reaching into the Santa's bag, Joel extracted a can of fruit cocktail and a tin of canned mandarin oranges. Now everyone was laughing and wiping away tears of joy. After a time of celebration and amazement, Joel turned to the father. The backpack was nearly empty, and he considered removing the few items left and asking the Father to make a selection. With 2 out of 3 miracles aren't bad. Why press your luck, you know? But something deep inside Joel's soul shouted, "Go for it." And before he could argue with God, he heard himself ask, "Gary, what's your favorite dessert?" And this wonderful servant of God smiled and said, "It's something no one else in the world likes, tapioca pudding." Joel nearly injured himself pulling the pudding from the pack and racing across the room to show him the Super 4 snack pack of tapioca pudding God had prompted him to buy 7 days earlier and 4,000 miles away. And what followed was praise and worship in its truest form as these 9 people crowded into a tiny living room in Romania wept and sang praises to God. And that day they gained new appreciation of Philippians 4:19, which is, "My God will meet all of your riches, all of your needs according to his glorious riches in Christ Jesus." Our God is able. And you know, we could spend the rest of today just going around this room one by one, telling stories of how God has met our needs. The God we serve is able to reconcile broken marriages, and he's done that in this room. The God we serve is able to liberate people from addiction, and he's done that with people in this room. The God we serve is able to heal damaged bodies and able to forgive the darkest sin. The God we serve is able to provide for the greatest needs and able to guide with supernatural wisdom, able to inspire spiritual gifting beyond human ability that's just unbelievable. The God we serve is able to soften the hardest hearts and able to bring the farthest runaway prodigal home. Everyone in this room, just by your physical existence, by your spiritual hunger, by your presence here in this community, you're a living testimony of this truth, that our God is able. Well, these 3 men say the God we serve is able, but they don't stop there. I want you to look at another statement of incredible courage. This is a statement of great dedication and commitment, because I think it's one of the most powerful statements any human being has ever made. Think about what has led up to this moment in their lives. These are 3 young Hebrew men who have been captured and exiled in a foreign country. They give their lives to God, and they serve him the best they can with formidable courage. Amazing things happen. They're promoted to positions of prominence in Babylon. And then one day, they hear about this king's edict that all the people must bow down to this God of gold. And they meet together as a little community, and they decide it's unthinkable that they would ever bend the knee or give their devotion to any God other than the God of heaven. They must have hoped and prayed that it would never come to this. I mean, they must have prayed after the story of Daniel in the dream in chapter 2 that Nebuchadnezzar would be converted and that he would follow the statement that he made about Daniel's God being the one true God. But that prayer wasn't answered. They must have prayed after this decree was made that Nebuchadnezzar would repent and that he would come to his senses about this. But he didn't. Maybe they prayed that this decree wouldn't be enforced, but it was. Maybe they prayed that because of Daniel's influence, the Jewish people might be excused from it, but they weren't. Maybe they prayed that when that day came, no one would notice that they didn't bow down. Or if they noticed, they wouldn't tell. But they noticed, and they told. Not one of these prayers was answered, not one. At every point, these 3 men were bitterly disappointed. At every point, this nightmare, their death, grew closer to a reality. And now they face their worst case scenario. They realize the door to every avenue of escape has been closed to them. The parachute has not opened, and it doesn't look like it's going to open. And so they testify once more to their faith in the one they serve. Verse 16 says, "King Nebuchadnezzar, we do not need to defend ourselves before you in this matter. If we're thrown into the blazing furnace, the God we serve is able to deliver us from it, and he will deliver us from your majesty's hands." And now look at verse 18, because this is one of the greatest statements of dedication and commitment ever uttered by any human being. But even if he does not, we want you to know, Your Majesty, that we will not serve your gods or worship the image of gold you have set up. Don't be deceived, Nebuchadnezzar. Our God can rescue us still. The God who drowned Pharaoh's army and knocked Jericho's walls down and conquered Goliath with a stone has not lost his strength. Our God can rescue us still. But even if he does not, we have already decided what our response is going to be. We've made up our mind. In the face of our worst case scenario, even if he does not, we want you to know, Your Majesty, that we are not going to serve the gods that you worship, this image of gold that you have set up. We will march to our death singing hymns of praise to the only God we will ever serve or love. Our God is able. Our God who drowned Pharaoh's army and knocked down Jericho's walls and conquered Goliath with a single stone and raised his son from the dead, and who has done this amazing work through Blue Oaks Church in Pleasanton, California, our God who brought you to existence and gave you new life and brought you here to this place, our God is able. Our God is able to answer our deepest prayers. Our God is able to fulfill our deepest dreams. But I'm here today to ask you a question. What about when he does not? What about when he does not? Is my commitment from one day to the next contingent on just getting from God what I want? What about when he does not give me what I want? I think of Job, who refused to dishonor God despite intense suffering day after day with no relief and no explanation, who says these amazing words from Job 13:15, though he slay me, yet I will trust him. Who else can I go to? Like, where else can I turn? What else can I do? To whom else would I belong? Though he slay me, yet I will trust him. I think of Esther, who, like these three men, decided one day that she would confront a tyrant king for the people of God, even though it would mean death. And she says in Esther 4:16, I will go to the king, even though it is against the law, and if I perish, I perish. I think of friends of mine who desperately want to have a child. And for so long, they have prayed and they have hoped. I don't think I've ever seen anyone more tenaciously cling to this hope. Our God is able. The God we serve is able. They prayed for over 7 years for a child. And when it felt like God wasn't answering that prayer, they decided that they wanted to adopt, that God must want them to adopt. And so they decided that God was calling them to adopt domestically. And so they went through this whole process, and they got placed with a girl who had an unwanted pregnancy. And they met with this girl a number of times and journeyed with her through the pregnancy. They were in the delivery room during the birth and received this child as if it were their own child. And they spent several days with this baby, believing that this child was an answer to their prayers, that finally God had given them the gift of a new life, of a baby. And several days later, the birth mom changed her mind, and they had to give the baby back. And in the midst of this great disappointment, they are completely devoted to God. This is a man and a woman who would give up anything in this world. They would give up business, money, home, whatever, to have this one prayer answered. And for reasons none of us can understand, it's just not happening for them. And this couple said through flowing tears, if we never have a child, we will not let go of God. We want this more than we've wanted anything in our life, but even if the answer is no, we will not let go of God. Even if he does not, though he slay me, yet I will trust him. A lot of people say, God, answer this one prayer. Like, grant this one request. Come through on this one dream, and I'll serve you. And I'll spend the rest of my life telling people about you. I'll do wonderful things for you. And so I'm here to ask you today, will you devote yourself to him even if he does not? Maybe you're in a relationship and you're extremely attracted to this person, but this person is pressuring you to cross sexual boundaries that you shouldn't cross, or is involved in behavior that's opposed to your deepest values. And you can rationalize staying together, but underneath, you're afraid, I may never find someone else that I'm so attracted to. I may end up alone. And you need to hear that God is able. God is able to bring someone far better into your life. But today, I'm asking you to say, even if he does not, even if God does not bring someone else into my life ever, even if it means facing fear and aloneness, I will not dishonor God anymore. I will not bend the knee to a relationship that I know doesn't please my Heavenly Father, even if he does not. Maybe you're in a marriage that is a disappointment to you, and you've been saying, God, I know that you're able, and he is able. Today I'm asking you to say, God, even if you do not, even if my marriage never becomes what I dreamed it would become. Maybe this involves finances. So often when it comes to material things, we focus on how God is able. And God is able to bring good things to us, and he does. But what about when he doesn't? Like, what about when he says not now, or not this thing, or not this way, or just flat out no? What kind of devotion does your financial life reflect? Just between you and God. Maybe you haven't been honoring God with your finances. And maybe you made a commitment this year to start to give more because you realize or you believe in your heart of hearts that it's more blessed to give than to receive. And so I'm asking you today to say, even if he does not, I will not worship a God of gold. My life will not be about affluence or financial security. And the truth is, most of us in this room live at a level of prosperity and influence and abundance unlike any other time in human history, throughout all of human society before us. And you know what? We didn't earn it. We don't deserve it. God just freely gives it. And I'm asking, will you decide in your heart of hearts that even if he does not, even if I never achieve the level of financial abundance that I feel like I must have, even if he doesn't, I'm going to honor him with my finances. I'm going to give full commitment. I'm asking, will you say this today? Even if he doesn't. Maybe the truth is, in your spirit, you've been saying something like this: if God would just make the people in my life or my family or my community group or my workplace like these spiritual giants who would give me affection and admiration and love, then I'll give him my motivated service or my motivated time. Today I'm asking you to say, even if he does not, even if the people in this area of my life continue to be difficult for me, I'll serve him with full devotion. And I'll serve them as if I were serving him, because somehow, even in serving the least of these, I'm serving him. And he's worth my complete devotion, my completely devoted service and actions and life. So I'm asking you to say this. Maybe you've been saying, if God gives me experiences and deep emotion with the type of music that I love, the kind of style that I love, then I'll be faithful in gathering with other brothers and sisters, and I'll give him worship. But otherwise, I'm going to find other things to do. Our God is able. Our God is able to move hearts to tears and joy and worship through music like nothing else. And I'm asking you today to say, even if he does not, even if he doesn't provide what I want, even if it's an effort for me, I will come and I will worship with complete devotion. I don't know what this means for you. I know that personally, from one day to the next, far too often the truth is that if my day goes well, if I get good news, if circumstances break for me in the right direction, I'm much more likely to live with joy. I'm much more likely to serve with a devoted spirit, to be more motivated to tell other people about God, to be more generous with my time and my money. If not, if I even get a little close to the furnace, I begin to bend the knee to the God called self-absorption or self-interest or self-pity. Because ultimately, the name of that gold statue that we're all tempted to bow to is me. Ultimately, the name of that unnamed statue in the story, it's what the human race has bowed to for centuries. It's simply me. And one day, ultimately, you will bow down before that statue, or you will bow down before God with full devotion. And so today I'm asking you, I'm calling you to a higher level, because we're called to live our lives centered in Christ and devoted to Christ, because he is our model. He's the one we love. He's the one who went before us. And the day came for him once in the garden when Jesus himself, the Son of God, said, "Father, let this cup pass from me. Do not make me go through this. Spare this from me. Spare me this ultimate suffering. You are able, Father." But then he said this, "Not my will, but yours be done." You're able to spare me, but even if you do not, I will not turn from you. I'll drink every last drop of this cup. And on the cross, the Son of God says to his Father, "Though he slay me, yet I will trust him." God is able. God is infinitely good, and he showers us with gifts of joy. But I'm asking you today, even if he does not, will you make a decision that you're going to be devoted to him? The band is going to come back up now, and while they do, you'll see the words on the screen that say, "The God we serve is able, but even if he does not." And I'm going to ask you to spend some time just talking to God about this. I want to ask you to reflect on this just in your life. Is there anywhere in your life where you've been holding back complete devotion? Anywhere in your life? Is there anywhere fear or disappointment or hurt or sin has been keeping you from following God with full abandonment, with absolute, complete trust? Have you been bending the knee anywhere else? And I'd just like to ask you right now to decide and to pray, even if he does not, I will be devoted to Christ in whatever area that is. So will you just bow your heads now and you decide, and you just take some time and talk to God, and then we're going to worship this God who is able.